August 11, 1943, New Georgia Island, Solomon Islands. Sergeant Robert Chen stared at 18 glowing blips on his radar screen 105 miles out and closing fast, and knew in 15 minutes those Japanese bombers would destroy everything the Americans had died to hold. The radar saw them, but by the time Bobby wrote down the coordinates, radioed them in Morse code to the airfield, waited for someone to decode the message and scramble fighters, those bombers were already overhead. It had happened 7 nights in a row. 14 U.S. aircraft destroyed on the ground, 23 soldiers dead, and his commanding officer had just told him, if we can't stop these raids in the next 72 hours, we're abandoning the island. Bobby had a microphone salvaged from a broken field radio, a soldering iron, and an idea that every Signal Corps engineer said would destroy the radar. But Bobby wasn't thinking about regulations. He was thinking about something his father told him on their California farm. If you want people to hear you fast, don't write it down, shout it. And he was thinking that if he didn't turn this radar into a walkie-talkie in the next 6 hours, 18 Japanese bombers were going to kill everyone at the airfield. The Americans had taken Munda Airfield after weeks of jungle fighting, but taking it wasn't enough. They had to hold it. And the Japanese weren't going to let that happen. Every night since, Japanese bomber formations launched from Rabaul and hit Munda under the cover of darkness. 12 to 24 bombers, flying low, fast enough to hit and run before fighters could intercept. The Americans had radar. It worked. It could spot incoming bombers at 100 miles. But spotting them wasn't the problem. The problem was what happened next. Bobby would see the blips on his screen. He'd write down the bearing, distance, and altitude. He'd hand it to a radio operator who transmitted in Morse code to the airfield, where another operator would decode it and relay it to flight control, who'd scramble the fighters. 4 steps, 4 people, 12 to 15 minutes. Japanese bombers flying at 200 miles per hour would cover 50 miles in that time. By the time fighters were airborne, the bombers were already turning for home. The Japanese knew it. They timed their raids perfectly. In 7 days, they destroyed 14 U.S. aircraft on the ground, 23 soldiers dead, and set back operations by 2 weeks. The commanding officer radioed all radar stations with an ultimatum. If we cannot intercept these bombers in the next 72 hours, we're abandoning Munda, meaning handing the Japanese a strategic victory and delaying the advance by months. Bobby's radar station was part of that deadline, and if the Japanese figured out where the intercept attempts were coming from, they'd bomb it. The station had no air defense, just sandbags. Bobby and his crew were sitting ducks. Robert Chen hadn't planned on being a radar operator. He'd planned on taking over his family's farm. Bobby grew up fixing the things that broke: tractors, irrigation pumps, and radios. Dozens of radios. His father couldn't afford to replace broken equipment during the Depression, so Bobby learned to improvise. At 15, he built a working radio transmitter from a car battery, salvaged copper wire, and vacuum tubes pulled from a broken console. By 17, he was fixing radios for neighboring farms. Bobby's father taught him 2 things about electronics. First, if it transmits, it can be modified. Second, the fastest way to send information isn't writing, it's talking. His father had rigged a radio to broadcast work instructions across their farm. 1 transmitter, multiple receivers in the fields. Bobby remembered his father saying, if you want people to hear you fast, don't write it down, shout it. After Pearl Harbor, Bobby enlisted. The Army saw radio repair on his intake form and assigned him to the Signal Corps. By early 1943, he was in the South Pacific operating radar on New Georgia. He wasn't supposed to be inventing anything. Radar operators followed the manual: spot, report, repeat. But after 7 nights of watching Japanese bombers slip through because communication was too slow, Bobby started thinking about his father's farm radio. The radar saw the bombers instantly. The problem was translation, turning that visual blip into coordinates, writing it, transmitting it in Morse code, decoding it, and relaying it to flight control. That was eating 12 minutes. Bobby thought, what if we skip the middle steps? What if the radar could talk directly to the fighters? Bobby proposed modifying the radar transmitter to double as a voice radio. The radar already had a transmitter. It sent out pulses to detect aircraft. Bobby's idea, piggyback a voice signal onto the same pulses. When the radar detected bombers, Bobby would speak into a microphone connected to the transmitter, and his voice would broadcast on the same frequency the fighters monitored. No Morse code, no relay. Radar detects, Bobby speaks, fighters hear him instantly. Captain Raymond Gould, the officer in charge, listened and said, "You want to destroy a $10,000 radar set to turn it into a walkie-talkie?"
Sir, if we don't do something in the next 3 days, the Japanese are going to destroy it for us. Captain Gould thought for a long time. Then he said, "You have 24 hours. If you break it, you're explaining it to the colonel." Bobby's plan was based on the same principle as RM radio. The radar transmitted pulses. Fighter radios could receive voice signals. If Bobby could feed an audio signal into the radar circuits, he could modulate the voice on top of the radar pulses. Engineers said it wouldn't work. The radar transmitted in short bursts, not continuously like a radio station. You couldn't modulate a pulse signal without destroying the radar function. The power would fry the voice circuit. The rotating antenna wouldn't broadcast audio effectively. But Bobby had built transmitters as a teenager using far cruder equipment. He knew that if he tapped into the right circuit and inserted a low-power audio signal, he could fill the gaps between radar pulses with voice data. The radar would still pulse, still detect planes, but between pulses, his voice would transmit. As for the antenna, the dish rotated to scan for aircraft. But if Bobby locked it in place, pointing towards the airfield, the fighters would hear him. It didn't need to be elegant. It just needed to work for 72 hours. Bobby worked through the night with 2 other operators. They opened the transmitter cabinet and located the modulation circuit. Bobby soldered a microphone input line into the circuit, bypassing the pulse limiter. He used a car battery to power the mic and built a crude amplifier from spare tubes. In the early morning hours, they powered up the radar. The screen flickered, stabilized, showed the normal scan pattern. The radar still worked. Bobby keyed the microphone. Radio check. Silence. The antenna was rotating too fast. His voice transmitted for a fraction of a second per rotation. They locked the antenna in place, pointing towards the airfield. Bobby keyed again. A crackling voice came back. "We copy you. Weak signal, but we copy you." At 9:47 p.m. on August 11th, the radar screen lit up. 18 contacts, bearing northwest, range 105 miles, altitude estimated 10,000 feet. Bombers. Bobby locked the antenna towards the airfield, keyed the mic, and spoke. "Bandits inbound, 18 contacts, bearing 320, range 105 miles, altitude Angels 10. Estimated time to target 30 minutes. The response came back in under 10 seconds. "Scrambling fighters now." Total communication time, 20 seconds. The old method would have taken 12 to 15 minutes. 6 fighters were airborne within under 4 minutes. Bobby kept updating their position every 60 seconds as the bombers closed in. Bandits now bearing 320, range 85 miles. Bandits now 70 miles, holding altitude. The fighters intercepted the formation 40 miles north of the airfield, well before they reached the island. They had altitude, surprise, and clear targeting data. They shot down 7 bombers in the first pass. The 11 remaining turned back. Not a single bomb fell that night. The Japanese came back the next night. 14 bombers. Bobby's voice system gave the fighters 9 minutes of warning instead of 3. 4 bombers shot down. The night after that, 22 bombers. Bobby tracked them for 90 miles, updating every 45 seconds. The fighters intercepted them 50 miles out. 17 bombers shot down. After 3 nights, the Japanese stopped coming. Intelligence later revealed that commanders believed the Americans had deployed a new experimental guidance system, possibly radar-equipped. They didn't know it was 1 sergeant, a soldered microphone, and a car battery. 3 nights, 28 Japanese bombers shot down, 0 U.S. aircraft lost on the ground. The airfield remained operational, the fighters stayed, the raids stopped.
Captain Gould submitted Bobby for a Distinguished Service Cross. It was downgraded to a Silver Star by a colonel who wrote, "Commendable initiative, but unauthorized equipment modification is not appropriate for the DSC." A technical team arrived to inspect the modification. They photographed it, took notes, and told Bobby to disassemble it because it violated orders. Bobby complied. The team left. That night, Bobby reassembled it. It stayed in use until October when the radar was replaced with a newer model. A classified memo later circulated describing Bobby's modification almost verbatim, but called it an experimental protocol developed by engineering staff. Bobby's name appeared nowhere. A fighter pilot wrote in his after-action report, "For the first time in this campaign, we had real-time intercept data. We weren't chasing ghosts. We knew where they were, how high, how fast."
The technique spread. Other radar stations began experimenting with voice integration. By early 1944, the concept evolved into ground-controlled intercept systems, dedicated radar stations with voice communication to guide night fighters. Officially, the military didn't adopt Bobby's exact modification. They developed purpose-built systems that integrated voice from the ground up. Bobby's jury-rigged solution proved the concept worked, but the military preferred engineered solutions over field improvisations. Bobby Chen returned home in 1945. He studied electrical engineering, went to work developing two-way radio systems for police and emergency services. He never spoke publicly about the radar modification. In 1998, a military historian found Bobby's Silver Star citation in the National Archives. The historian interviewed Bobby, then 77. Bobby's response, "I just wanted the planes to stop dropping bombs on us. Turns out talking to the pilots worked better than writing them letters." Bobby Chen died in 2003 at age 82. His obituary mentioned his engineering career. No mention of New Georgia, no mention of 28 bombers. Military histories credit engineering teams with inventing ground-controlled intercept, not a farm kid with a soldering iron and a car battery on a jungle island in August 1933. Bobby's modification was dismantled, the Silver Star citation was filed away, and Bobby went home, became an engineer, and spent 50 years building radios without ever telling anyone he'd once turned a radar into a weapon that saved an island in August 1933.